This is on. Good evening, all, and welcome to this very special event where we are not only meeting our alumni and friends, but we also doing something else that's very important. Two things that are very, very important, and these are we are launching our newest research center in the Faculty of Environment, and it's a center on ecosystem resilience and adaptation. And we are also going to be using this opportunity to make a presentation to one of our distinguished alumni. This is the Alumni Achievement Award. Before I go further, now that I have your attention, let me introduce myself. My name is Deep Saini. I am Dean of the Faculty of Environment and very excited to be in that position because every day in this faculty is a new and exciting day, and we've been actually, for the last 3 years or so, it's been just a wonderful journey. Kind of faculty has been it's been rocketing ahead on a number of fronts, and one of those is the event that we are doing today and what we are actually about to launch here. I will come back here and I'll tell you a little bit more about the faculty, but before we go any further, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the President of the University of Waterloo, Professor David Johnston. David, I don't think I need to introduce David. He is about the best leader anybody could hope for, and a great mentor, and a wonderful friend of anybody who's ever known David. David, please come and say a few words here.
Thank you, Deep. Well, Deep, thank you very much. I do appreciate the best friend. That means an awful lot to me. About the best president, I've got my doubts. We had an article in the Globe and Mail several months ago that was comparing Toronto and Waterloo, and one of my friends, a business leader, was speaking about the collaborative nature of our community and said, you know, we get along with one another. It's easy to contact one another. And in a rash moment, he said this, and it was quoted now, take David Johnston. He's the best university president on the planet, and you can phone him up and go for lunch. Well, that evening, my wife, whom Jim would know well, was reading the newspaper, and she looked at this quote, and she lowered her glasses and lowered the newspapers and repeated the quote, and then she said, and what planet might that be, dear? You know, Deep is so true when he speaks about this rocket faculty of environment. It's so exciting to see what's happened under his leadership and with the great colleagues who've been working together to establish a faculty of environment that is very, very special, and you'll learn more about it tonight. I'm going to turn the podium over to Gordon Mueller in a moment, but I'm absolutely fascinated by this slide that we see up here. Gord, I think I'd prefer to be on the blimp than on the boat in that slide. We're so excited also about the Center for Ecosystem Resilience and Adaptation, which we are unveiling, celebrating, and essentially launching tonight, led by Steve Murphy, who's right here and you'll hear from in a moment. And I should say I like both of those words very much. And Tad, where are you? Where's Tad Homer-Dixon? Right over there. Tad, as you know, is the author of The Ingenuity Gap, The Upside of Down. He hasn't told us the title of his next book, but it might be Resilience or something to do with resilience. Tad and I were at a conference of 15 or 20 wonderful people focusing on economic matters and sustainable development matters. And I made a comment at one point that in looking at our economic system, which has its fragility, and our environmental system, which clearly has, I revert to Darwin, as I often do, and Darwin once said, it's not the most powerful or the strongest of the species that will survive, it's the most adaptable. And Tad, in his inimitable way, when he got up, kind of corrected that and said, yes, adaptability is important, resilience is even more important. Just think about those two words when you think about any system, be they social systems or natural systems or environmental systems, and how proud we are to have this center that focuses on the ecosystem with those two important qualities at the forefront, and how lucky we are to have Steve to lead it. Now, as to the university, Deep and I are glad to be away today. We were at an event at IBM at noon today, and I started out about 5:30 this morning for a 7:30 meeting in Toronto, and I normally don't like getting started that early, but it's not a bad time to be out of town in Kitchener-Waterloo because Oktoberfest has begun. And when we were introduced at Oktoberfest, our host at the IBM, our host said, we're told that Oktoberfest in Kitchener-Waterloo is the second largest and loudest Oktoberfest anywhere in the world with the exception of Munich, Germany. And I said, I sure would want to see Munich, Germany at the end of next week, because Kitchener-Waterloo certainly is a loud and lively place. This is also the month when we pray to the rating gods, because Maclean's magazine will come out usually the first Monday of November, and we do our prayers. As you know, Maclean's has treated Waterloo very kindly for 18 years. In the reputational survey, which considers the reputation of all 50 or 55 Canadian universities, not divided into categories of comprehensive, medical, doctoral, undergraduate, etc., all the universities. For 16 of the 18 years, the University of Waterloo has been rated best by reputation in Canada. And for 18 of those 18 years, it has been rated most innovative in Canada. And last year, in the third category, Leaders of Tomorrow, we were rated at the top there. As much as we love the rating of best university by reputation in the country, we love even more most innovative and Leaders of Tomorrow. Because if you're innovative today and if you're producing the leaders of tomorrow today, then your reputation in 5 and 10 years' time will be pretty intact. And so let's continue to be noted as a very innovative place and a place that continues to produce the leaders of tomorrow. I could go on at great length. I will not, because I'm anxious that we get on with the balance of our evening, and it gives me great pleasure to turn the podium over to Gord Mueller, who is the Province of Ontario Environmental Commissioner, who has been in this office for almost 10 years as a person whose position was created by the legislature and has all party support in the legislature. Gord, over to you.
Thank you, David. I'm very, very pleased to be here, and I just wanted to set the scene. I am the Environmental Commissioner for Ontario. I oversee 14 government ministries and an agency, and with respect to government decision-making, it relates to the environment. I'm the watchdog, and I enjoy my job, and I think I do a pretty good job at it. I'm an ecologist by training, dating back in 35 years ago. I can't believe it when I say that, but 35 years ago when I was trained as an ecologist, we used to have our heroes, and Dr. Halling was one of our heroes, and he used to talk about things like resilience, and that was my training, and we talked about ecological resilience and how important it was, but we knew that was a concept, adaptation and resilience actually, and it was a concept from our little clique, our little academic field, and we sort of thought we were very important and very shrewd to understand this, but of course it had no uptake in the greater sphere of things. Time goes on, and you do different things in your life, and I became the Environmental Commissioner, and I take some pride in that. In my reports, I tell my staff, look, we got to build a lexicon. I built up concepts around biodiversity, for instance, in Ontario, trying to sell that concept to get greater understanding. And one of the things I do, although I have an excellent staff of brilliant young people that help me produce these annual reports, here's my latest one that came out last week. And one of the things I do, I reserve in my annual report the front essay. This for myself exclusively, and although I prove every word in here, and I reserve the right to cast the theme of the report, and that is done actually about a year ahead of the release, and I actually read Tad's book, and I saw your discussion of resilience in that, and I said to my staff, you know what? As an ecologist, I've been, playing around with this and it's underlined, but I always felt that it wasn't a term whose time had come, the understanding wouldn't be there. It would be too complex for society to tangle with. But given our challenges, and when I read Tad's book, I said, you know what? He's right. The time has come that resilience is the concept to introduce into the greater sphere of things to influence public policy. So I said the report is going to be called Building Resilience. And it was a year ago that I cast that wish. I wish I had thought of Building Resilience and Adaptation, but I hadn't. So you got one on me there, Steve. But I think it's absolutely right. And since that time, we've been inundated with resilience as it coming out of the various aspects of the media, of society, including now, a Center for Ecosystem Resilience and Adaptation at the University of Waterloo, which I think is a marvelous thing. And I think its time is absolutely right. And I think that it will help society come to terms. We've been struggling with the concepts of sustainability since 1987. 87, and when the Brundtland Commission report came out, and we've probably taken that as far as we can in terms of a word that restructures or helps to change a society. Resilience is the absolute concept. Resilience and adaptation. Those are the concepts that we have to alert society. That is the way we have to go. That is the change of thinking that has to happen. And I'm absolutely tickled that the University of Waterloo has thrust themselves out in the forefront of this, and I wish you every success in your efforts in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mueller. It's nice to have you here, especially since you've personally supported this center and its creation with some real money and other help. So thank you very much again for all your help and stewardship for what we do. It is also my pleasure to welcome Jim Kunstler here. Jim, thank you very much for coming and helping us launch this center. If everything you write turns out to be true, and I personally believe that much of it is going to be true, one thing we're going to need a lot of is resilience, and so it's a very good marriage that you should be here to help us launch this new center. Now, as we talk about this center, I want to acknowledge one person who has put enormous amount of energy into into getting this whole idea of a center to the point where it is today, and that is Steve Murphy. Steve, stand up, please, and because it's hard to see you when you're sitting down. Steve has earned the position of the director of this center by his sheer work and determination and his ability to bring people together in not only among many faculties on UW campus, but also a lot of people from outside and pulling resources for the center. Steve, bravo. Have a seat. The center is being launched from the University of Waterloo campus, but it actually is going to do much of its work, a lot of its work, in a new facility in the town of Huntsville. And we have some guests and friends from Huntsville, and as I say their names, it would be nice if they can stand up so we can recognize them. The mayor of Huntsville, Claude Doughty, is with us. And the Chief Operating Officer, Kelly Pander, he's with us. We also have the Deputy Mayor of the town, Fran Coleman. She's with us. And I'll go this way because I'm starting to give Jim's presentation as we speak. I'll go back to this. Yeah. Can't keep my fingers under control. And we have Greg Ross. He's from Northern Ontario College of Medicine. There's Greg. And then we have Christopher Thorpe, who, and if I had time, I would tell you a lot about this man, but I won't. I just simply introduce. Christopher, please stand up. It's through the efforts of these people that we today are building a new building in Huntsville. That's a 30,000 square foot building, which is going to house some of the research facilities, training facilities, and a residence for up to 50 students who we will take there as part of their training, as well as we will conduct non-degree training at that facility. It's just a wonderful place. It should be up and ready definitely by this time next year. It should be actually ready in June when it's going to be used by the G8 Summit, and then after that, with some alterations, it's going to be handed over to University of Waterloo as our research and training facility. And it is our shared dream that we will actually use this building as a catalyst to build something much larger there, hopefully a whole campus dedicated to environmental issues. And I am actually very confident that with time we will realize that shared dream. Let me tell you a bit more about Faculty of Environment. I think these are also the moments when there are a number of our alumni here and other friends, and it's not only just about an opportunity to brag, but also an opportunity to bring you up to speed on what has been happening. Faculty of Environment today, it would be fair to say, is the fastest growing faculty on University of Waterloo campus. And anybody who knows Waterloo knows that University of Waterloo grows very rapidly, does things very rapidly. So to be the fastest growing faculty on that very fast campus is quite something. Give you some stats. In the last 3 years, we have more than doubled our enrollment at undergraduate level, while we have raised standards significantly every year, standards for admission. We could actually go much farther than doubling the size of the faculty if we had maintained the same standards we had 3 years back. Graduate enrollment has doubled the same way. Research grants are going up. We are in the process of building 2 new buildings, one with the help of the town of Huntsville and the federal government, and another one on campus, a 52,000 square foot expansion of our current facilities, which is a building on 4 stories. Those of you who know our existing building, it's going partially above the ES2 building, or what used to be called ES2 building. It's called EV2 building now. It's going to be a LEED Gold building. It would be the first LEED Gold building on University of Waterloo campus. And who knows, we are also dreaming about even LEED Platinum. I think it's going to be tough to achieve that because of just the nature of the project and where we're building it, but definitely a LEED Gold building. Thank you. Aside from the growth on the enrollment side, the faculty has launched a number of new initiatives. We are partnering with the Faculty of Engineering, for example, and to some extent with the Faculty of Science in our Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy. Ecosystem and Resilience Center is another large center that's being launched. Last year we launched a Center on Climate Change Research, or IC3, Ice Cube, some people call it. That's one of the larger centers at University of Waterloo that brings together a number of faculties plus a number of outside agencies. And soon, on the 6th of November, we would be launching one of the most exciting things this faculty, in my view, has ever done, and a place where nobody ever thought this faculty would end up going. We are going to publicly launch, this entity already exists, but publicly launch the School of Environment, Enterprise, and Development. You can think about that as the world's first truly dedicated, comprehensive green business and development school. It would have, at maturity, it would have about 800 undergraduate and graduate students in it. Currently, the enrollment is just shy of 500. So some exciting things happening in the faculty. The new building I told you about, and once we finish building that new building, we are going to embark on the green retrofits to our existing 2 buildings. There would be quite a lot of changes happening to those buildings as well. Now, I know before I was dean, I was a professor, and professors like to talk. So I could keep on talking forever, especially if it is about our faculty. But I will restrain myself and stop talking now and move on to the next pleasure, and that is the pleasure to reintroduce Steve Murphy, who will come up here and say a few words, and then introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
You remember the feeling you get when you're 4 years old and it's Christmas? I have that feeling now. Really. I'm going to try to get through these 5 minutes without crying, which is sort of interesting, but nonetheless, I'm sure I'll try to do that, my best for that. Deep, thank you very much for that introduction. It was wonderful. I'm kind of overwhelmed to say the least. I actually had to write down remarks tonight so I actually wouldn't forget what I was going to say, which is, for those of you speaking academics like to talk, you know me. I do like to talk. I do like to listen too, but I do like to talk. So I'm going to start talking about, first of all, how this center was created very briefly. Transdisciplinary centers like the ERA, the Center for Ecosystem Resilience and Adaptation, can be like herding cats. This is not the case with this one. I've had extremely generous support from all of the 6 faculties, and that is, again, I think remarkable. And that's sort of where I think this thing has been a very great pleasure. So I've actually sort of very happily been the midwife to some degree of this sort of thing. And it's been very nice actually sort of seeing that level of cooperation that characterizes actually a lot of our enterprises at the University of Waterloo. So that's been quite nice. The center is a vehicle for expertise from universities, from government, from NGOs, from private enterprise. It is meant to be sort of very much community focused. It is meant to address a lot of the complex issues that people like James Howard Kunstler, our speaker tonight, has tried to sort of address with very much sort of analysis that is sort of both incisive and, if you read his books, alarming. Fairly so, by the way. That's not a criticism. I will say very briefly, and I mentioned this to Jim actually just before we got up here and spoke, I first became a fan of Jim's books way back when I first read An Embarrassment of Riches, which is one of his first novels, not the first, but one of the first. The reason why I like that one is because it's about a goofy plant ecologist. And that's me. Well, that's not me in the book. Who stumbles through life, but ultimately prevails largely because of good fortune rather than good planning. And that is very much descriptive to some degree of how I've done my career, despite what the family may think sometimes that I've actually planned this out entirely. I feel like, again, I've had fairy godmothers all over the place, actually, and tonight's sort of, I think, the outcome of that. I don't want to be too humble about it, but nonetheless, it's not my baby here. This is sort of the response of dozens of people. Well, we have these massive challenges, people like our speaker tonight has actually talked about. And we'll talk about, as you see from his presentation, was Deep started to give. Very, very nice, Deep. That was great, actually. We are best suited to do this because we actually have a faculty of environment, unlike most universities. But we also have 5 other faculties that have people interested in the environment as an endeavor individually, with small research groups, or indeed entire units. And that's sort of what makes us, I think, unique in the world, both in terms of our university and this center. Robert Ingersoll, who unfortunately people don't much remember, sort of lasting in the 19th century, early 20th, said something I always sort of believed was quite true, which is that in nature, there are no rewards or punishments, there are only consequences, and that, I think, to some degree, is the ethos of this particular center. Our goal for ERA actually is to tackle these complex problems and try to figure out how best to respond to them. As it's sort of a bit of a hoary sort of approach, we don't manage ecosystems so much as we manage the people. That's quite true. Nonetheless, we have to figure out, sort of as Gord Mueller mentioned, actually, what do these terms actually mean? Integrity, resilience, adaptation, sustainability. What do those things actually mean? From one example, we often try to sort of essentially try to manage ecosystems so that we look at maintaining or restoring them to things like the historical range of dynamics. That may or may not make sense because it may not be possible to go back. It may not be possible to maintain them, especially in the face of things like climate change or any sort of other human endeavors. So we need to figure out exactly how things adapt, hence the other part of this particular center's name. And indeed, for those indwelling and interacting, including human beings, of course, as part of a center enterprise, this is what this center is all about. As succession proceeds, as climates change, we need to be very much more clever about how we actually live, lest we actually experience these sort of problems that come from an unresilient ecosystem. Again, I can recommend Jen's book, actually, Long Emergency, is one example, and indeed some of the novels associated with that, as one of the sort of response to what happens when you don't pay attention to what's going to go on. So this center is meant to, perhaps to some degree of hubris, to try to prevent that from happening. It comes down ultimately then to thinking and doing, which is what centers are supposed to be about. A very simple thing for me to state, a very difficult thing to actually achieve. So we try to achieve great things. We've had strong direction through 40 years of this faculty environment, starting with Distinguished Professor Emeritus George Francis, who started doing this indeed 40 years ago, along with Buzz Halling, as Gord mentioned actually in his remarks. These folks actually sort of led the way. We've had guidance from friends and colleagues like Tad Homer Dixon, like Francis Wesley, for example. And indeed, we try to lead with new centers, with new facilities, and we try to sort of essentially get to a stronger ethos for our own students today in terms of getting to experience things, to actually get out there and do things, rather than just sit around contemplating, especially one's navel. So we're going to try, of course, to foster this event. But one of the things I want to do, and Deep's already sort of gives us a thank you, is, and I will sort of add my voice here to it. We have David Johnston, who is indeed the most go-gettingest president ever I've seen in my life. I've actually seen him literally be in 7 meetings at the same time, while he's writing 2 Royal Commission reports, getting $100 million from the university, and probably talking to 15 people on 15 phones, actually. So for those of you who wonder what a president does, pretty much everything, actually. Our former provost, Emma Chakma, who's gone down to Western, their gain, indeed, our loss, was a big help in actually getting the center off the ground. Our VP of Research, George Dixon, was instrumental as well. Deep gave me sort of a bit of praise there, well, actually a lot of praise, let's be frank, actually. I want to return that of a favor. He's been a really supportive mentor and indeed a champion of this particular center and my particular role in it. That is also true of my friend and colleague Ian Rowlands as the Associate Dean of Research, and my department chair Paul Kay, my friends and colleagues in Environment Resource Studies, and indeed the Faculty of Environment. We've had financial support. Nature Conservancy Canada, we have John Lowndes coming up next, and John Riley, who I want to mention specifically. Parks Canada, that's Brian Hutchinson, Steve McCanney, Harry Beach, and Paul Zorn. Ontario Parks, Rob Davis, Barton Fielders, and Adair Smith. Definitely the Office of the Environment Commissioner of Ontario, that would be Gord Mueller and my friend Chris Wilkinson as well, I wanted to mention. The EGLBA Foundation of Robert Alain, ACER's Alice Castleman, who's here with us tonight, Caroline in Canada, the Wilberforce Foundation, and definitely, of course, to mention, so we have several representatives of our alumni tonight, the Ontario Ministry of the Environment and Natural Resources. That's a lot of people. Deepest thank the people from Huntsville, Claude and Kelly and Fran and Christopher. Greg Ross has joined us here from the mid school. John Cowan and Don Cowan, I wanted to thank. Don is a distinguished professor emeritus of the University of Waterloo, John being his son, who was a resident of Huntsville. They have been instrumental, actually, in doing a lot of work from there. And I'd be remiss without thanking the Honorable Tony Clement and allies as well for sort of giving us a facility like Huntsville. That's going to be a major boost to our particular center. And indeed, we have colleagues from Victoria to Buffalo, that's in New York, to the UK, to Australia. We don't have been to Torres Springs yet. We'll try to work on that, actually, Jim, so we'll go from there. And I would be sort of finally sort of remiss to sort of thank that my wife and my daughter, Tara and Kate, who aren't here tonight because my daughter would probably want to monopolize Daddy's time, and fairly so. They're at home tonight, actually, and they send me their love by text, which is very nice of them. They have been a major support in my particular life. In the end, I also want to make sure that we acknowledge current and former students, both those groups are here tonight. They're in spirit, they're in person. You lobbied for things like the Huntsville facility, through things like this center, and it is through your lobbying efforts, your support, your generosity that we got it. It's not just, of course, sort of comes down to that, but that's why we're here tonight. So very much thanks to all of you. And indeed, to those I taught, who are actually have seen tonight already, and we'll see after the presentation, I hope I've actually been useful to you. Maybe not inspirational, but at least useful. I certainly know one thing I can tell you. I loved every minute of teaching you. That's what I do. Well, I can feel a group hug coming on. Or a round of kumbaya. How cliched. So what I'm going to do at this point is my duty, which is to pass the microphone on to John Lowndes, planning alumnus of 1978, a member of the Dean's Advisory Council, the president of Nature Conservancy Canada, who's going to say a few words himself and formally introduce tonight's guest, James Howard Kunstler. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. And Merry Christmas. And many Happy New Years to come. I think it's going to be a great center, and with your leadership, it's going to really add to all the conservation and environment work that's being done across the country, and I'm looking forward to working with you to see that happen. As a graduate of the Faculty of Environment and the School of Urban and Regional Planning, I am honored and pleased to be able to introduce tonight's guest speaker, James Howard Kunstler. And as a graduate of the School of Urban and Regional Planning, it's always great to introduce someone who's a critic of urban and regional planning, because I think often those of us in professions don't look enough at the work that we do and make sure that it's relevant to changing times and changing situations. Mr. Kunstler is a well-known author of several books, including The Geography of Nowhere, Home from Nowhere, The Long Emergency, Surviving the End of the Oil Age, Climate Change, and Other Converging Catastrophes of the 21st Century. Wow. And World Made by Hand, his 10th novel. He's also just finished writing, I understand, the sequel to that novel. And we should all look forward to seeing that in print in a year's time or so. Is that correct? Sooner, maybe. Mr. Kunstler has lectured extensively about urban design, energy issues, new economies for several conferences, professional organizations, and a number of colleges and universities across the United States and elsewhere. He is a seasoned journalist. He continues to write for the Atlantic Monthly, Slate.com, the New York Times Sunday Magazine, and its op-ed pages, where he covers issues related to the environment, urban planning, and the economy. I ask you to welcome our guest speaker for this evening, James Howard Kunstler.
Hope you don't mind. I know this is a formal society.